Hi, it's Craig Wilson here, and welcome to the Making the Media podcast. Thanks a lot for taking the time to join us for another in-depth discussion on the topics which matter to the media business. This episode comes just after the NAB show in Las Vegas, of course, where the industry's vendors and broadcasters come to discover the latest and greatest technology innovations on the market. So it's appropriate then that innovation is the focus this time around. My guest is Chris Bailey, who is the head of innovation at the UK media solution provider Jigsaw24. Chris's focus is on developing future technology roadmaps for their customers and assessing solutions on the market. We'll come on to talk about that, managing so-called hype cycles around subjects such as the cloud and AI, and much more. But I began by asking Chris to give us some background to how he landed in his current role.
So yeah, I've been in the industry for 24 years now. Bit of a kind of different start for many people, really. So I started off as a runner, as a lot of people did, but actually at a technology company, so at a reseller. So I started off at Route 6 as a runner, lugging kit to and from post houses around Soho. The old Soho map that we used to put together was pretty good. So yeah, that kind of traditional Route 6 reseller model. And then, as a runner, I started kind of putting bits of media composer together from bits of spares and in boxes, etc. And over the time, kind of working with the engineers on installs and repairs, and then kind of made my way through the engineer ranks. And I was fortunate enough to have Graham McGuinness and Rupert Watson and Neil Kemsley and those guys in the engineering team who, just a wealth of experience. And I just learned so much off them over the years. And then eventually, I became the head of support for 5 years or so, while at Route 6, dealing with critical installs and upgrades, etc., and support for feature films, and with really kind of Avid at the heart of almost everything that we did. I think we were kind of like the premier UK reseller for Avid, really, and that was really our bread and butter in post. And then in 2017, Route 6 got acquired by Jigsaw24, and I moved into pre-sales, so building technical solutions for on-premise and cloud-based live and post workflows. And then I led the pre-sales team for about 4 years or so, until more recently, in the past year or so, I'm now the head of innovation at Jigsaw24 Media. So not so much in a sales role, but looking at net new solutions, aligning them with against our own portfolio and assessing them against what our current portfolio is. And more importantly, it's really working with customers on their technology roadmap and workflows at a more kind of personal level. So not at a sales level and going, yes, you need some new storage for this, but actually looking at their future roadmap and where we can help them in the future.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. I think we'll come back to that as well and discuss that a little bit more. And for people who don't know, tell us a bit about Jigsaw, because as you mentioned there about how this evolution, of the company to where it is today. So tell us a little bit about Jigsaw and the sort of main areas of focus that they have these days.
Yeah, so Jigsaw is quite an interesting one. So Jigsaw is known historically as a kind of Apple catalog brand, really. So a big Apple reseller, I think, with one of only a few AERs in enterprise resellers in Europe, and we're certainly the biggest in the UK. And that's what Jigsaw have been known for a very long time. So they did spin up a media arm before the Route 6 acquisition, and then with the Route 6 acquisition, they bought all of our broadcast and post experience from the Route 6 side to grow out that media arm. We've grown exponentially over that time. So we now operate as a completely separate business unit to Jigsaw24. We have shared resources with them, but under Jason Cowan, who's ex-Avid, he's our managing director at the Jigsaw Media level. We are utterly focused in post-production and broadcast. And most of the people who work for Route 6 are still with us now. So Graham, for instance, and Neil Kemsley, those guys, and myself, we're all still going. So we are absolutely 100% focused on post and broadcast in that area, and we do run as that separate business unit. We have our separate website, we have our own P&L, that kind of thing. So we do still share resources with Jigsaw, but we kind of separate the business unit out with the website, etc. So, and we're still based in centre of London as well. We're in Whitfield Street, so we have kept ourselves well in the fold of where the post houses are, really.
So post and broadcast, big markets that are there.
Yeah.
try to sum things up then. What are the major challenges that you're trying to help your customers solve as things stand today?
Yeah, I think I mean, traditionally and historically, for certainly when I've been working there, offline used to be kind of really where some money was being made and everyone was spinning up offline houses. Now, I think offline really there's no real money in it anymore. It's almost seems to be a race to the bottom for those guys, which is a real shame. And they're trying to kind of maintain their customers due to budgets. Real estate in London is horrendously expensive now. We're seeing people moving out of London. It's great to see the West Country kind of really stepping up. So Wales and Bristol, there's a lot of offline and post work happening over there. But I think just budget constraints and it's spending money to save money, should I say, at the moment. I think if you're looking at new technology, the challenges are how do we save money to grow our tech, but also save money in the long run because offline really isn't making that much money anymore. It's still a brilliant industry, and London is still absolutely pumping, but it doesn't seem to have that same feel that they do. And obviously, it's keeping up with the technology roadmap as well that they want to do, keeping the customers delivering that same experience, but also giving them different avenues to explore, while also keeping the costs down and maintaining those customers going forward.
It's the reality for some of them, the looking at it, is that in some ways their tech spend may actually go up, but it's actually delivering other benefits to allow them to do more.
Yeah, that's it. It's offering value and a service that people are willing to pay for. It's keeping up with that. I think I've mentioned this a few times in various things, but how do you keep up the constant state of flux? Change is happening all of the time. It's happening so quickly now, whereas before you might get a tech trend and it will take a couple of years to kind of to catch on. And either it was financially way out there or it was actually easier obtainable. Now everything just seems to be so quick and easy to get hold of. Yes, cost is still an issue, but how are they keeping up with that constant state of change? And that's where really we're helping to kind of step in and navigate them through that change.
Yeah, you talked about the cost of real estate in London and the fact, some teams have sort of diversified out to other parts of the
Yeah.
regions within the UK. But is that also increasing the challenges around people want to work remotely and having to try to support them as well? Is that something else that you're seeing now much more?
Yeah, so during the whole kind of COVID period, if we want to go back that far, so as Route 6, we developed some remote solutions that we kind of took from the banking industry really, maybe 11, 12 or so years ago. So we kind of put our money where our mouth was a while ago, and we put stuff in a data center and we remoted into everything, way before COVID, and we were showing customers that this is what we're doing, and they're like, it kind of won't really catch on. But obviously the industry was very different then. And I think COVID had a massive impact on the way people want to work, expect to work. If you're looking for a job now as well, I think some form of remote or home working just really has to be included in that as well. And we have customers and companies who have to have this kind of hybrid model of they still want to offer the experience on premise. So, the nice room with the sofa and the glass monitor and the coffee and the runners and all those kinds of things, offer the experience, but obviously be able to have the ability to offer the remote working as well and a hybrid view of it as well. So a challenge that they have really is how do you commercialize that in a way where you're saying, well, actually, you're paying for our services, but you're paying for services in a room, or are you paying for services remotely, or are you wanting both? I think that's a really difficult one for them to work out. So do you charge them for the services on one side and then the equipment on the other side? How do you find that kind of happy medium between the two financial models so you are agile enough to offer these services at a good rate that a production company is willing to pay for instance, and not go to the other one down the road who are offering a very similar service. So kind of goes to my point of almost a little bit of a race to the bottom in terms of offline. But I still think that the experience is really key, and reputations in this business are everything. You're only as good as your last job. I think we all know that. And it's keeping and maintaining those customers as technology moves along and offering more services on top with with not potentially making the prices too ridiculously out of reach.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple of things there that Chris, I wanted to pick up. One is value, and I think value is something that it comes up more and more in discussions with customers these days. But the other thing you also mentioned was about that sort of personal relationship that you try to have.
Yeah.
The technology is changing so quickly, as we've kind of mentioned. How
Mm.
important is it to have that sort of trusted relationship to help the people that you're working with navigate change? I mean, we'll come on to talk about hype cycles and AI and things like that in a minute as well. But having that relationship, how important do you think that is when people come to you and say, "I've heard about X," and
Yeah.
you can actually turn around and say, "Well, in reality, you maybe want to think a little bit clearer about what it is you actually want to
Yeah.
achieve."
Yeah, and those it's absolutely huge. Like I said, relationships are everything. This industry is incredibly small. You could walk down the street and see someone. I saw someone yesterday, in fact, at a technology roadmap meeting I haven't seen for 10 years. And you just start talking, find out what they've been up to, where they've been, what stuff that they've been up to in terms of technology wise. Um, and I think we're in a kind of really good position at the size of the company that we are. And we do have the ability to segregate our support professional services are kind of really one team, but then our pre-sales and let's say, me, Graham and Neil, for instance, you know, we aren't because we're not working at so much of a pre-sales level. We have the ability to go and look at new stuff. So as I said about my role as head of innovation, my role is to actually go and find these things, spend the time to run vendor analysis, assess it against the portfolio, align it to what our customer roadmaps might look like, and actually find things for them that are interesting. So having our kind of finger on the pulse has really been something that has been really important to us, in the past and certainly in the future. And we have that trust level from customers, from historically doing, critical upgrades at, 2 o'clock in the morning through X for X broadcasters or whatever, we've been the boots on the ground there. We've built up that trust and that relationship from not just a support level, but also from a sales level, from a reputation level. If someone calls me at 2 in the morning on my mobile phone, this kind of stuff that used to happen, we were there and we've built up those relationships as we go and we kind of maintain them as we go through in the business.
Yeah, the amount of time we've all spent in server rooms watching servers reboot is time we're never going to get back, Chris. So that's one of the things
Yes.
I can certainly sympathise with. So you talked there about as head of innovation, looking at the marketplace and looking at new things that come along. Of course, what that means is that you're then providing multiple tools from multiple different vendors to pull together a solution. How does that square in terms of trying to make things simpler for customers, when in reality the actual solution itself might be more complex?
Great question. It's and this is one thing that a lot of people don't really understand about a reseller. And I know this is audio, so you can't see my inverted commas, but when you have a reseller or a value-added reseller, or some people might like to call it a box shifter, however you want to look at it, that absolutely isn't us, and it never has been. We transact, I think it's between 140 and 150 vendors, which is insane. So, kind of how do you keep up with that? But these could be anything from, a small cable manufacturer to everything from, an Avid to a cable manufacturer. But we do have a set of 30 baseline vendors who we have a managed vendor alliance bit around, and they have a dedicated vendor manager. So we make sure it's important that we are able to do sales, pre-sales, technical support to a specific level and have whole marketing campaigns around that top end part of it. But also, we're well versed in every little component that goes underneath it. So that could be 150 vendors. If you take audio, for instance, the amount of connectors that we do on a day-to-day basis for that's it's mad. But on a video standpoint, everything's moving to software. So in terms of kind of hardware wise, there's a little bit less happening there. But I think the most important thing for me to kind of really explain is that as Jigsaw24 Media, we don't sell product. We've never sold product. We've always sold solution. So it wouldn't be, yes, obviously, if someone needs an HP to do this, for instance, yeah, absolutely. But actually, generally, we're putting that into a solution that we may have already installed. We know the site. We know the customer, we know their workflows. If we're putting something in, we will be 100% sure that we're putting the right solution in or the right product to fit into the solution. So it's yeah, something that we're very well versed in, and we have an entire back end system that we have called Showcase, which is actually really interesting. So for people who aren't as well versed in a specific solution, we write up all these reports and workflows, etc. So it's common across the business. We have all of our workflow diagrams and everything organized. So we know where we are across the business, and it is providing that solution rather than the product.
So, as head of innovation, the one topic we probably can't avoid at the moment is AI, because everyone is kind of talking about it. But I want to talk about AI in a slightly different context, because a phrase that we used earlier was about hype cycles. And I think that's something that we've seen in the industry. If you go back, 10, 15 years ago, everything was going to be 3D. We then moved into the cloud was going to solve every challenge that we were ever going to have. And we now have things around AI. So what I want to ask about is, how do you sort of moderate that excitement that comes with it with, look, this is the reality of what's actually available? And is that, again, sort of part of your role, is to say to people, look, let's calm down a little bit and actually put our thoughts together about what does this practically mean, as opposed to let's go headlong down the road of this particular piece of innovation?
Yeah. Good old AI. It is the talking point, isn't it? So yeah, I mean, AI is a tricky one because there is so much hype around it, and it is the latest big thing. Obviously, we'll probably get onto cloud in a bit, but what we tend to do is we run innovation workshop sessions with customers. So I did two last month. I did one actually on Wednesday this week. And we sit down with a customer, and there was 12 of them in there, and we run about a 4 hour session, and we look at their technology footprint, their future roadmaps, and what trends and what solution focus that they'll be looking at in the long term or even in the short term. And that's kind of part of my role, is to work with them at that level. And then AI will inevitably come up. But interestingly, it depends who the customer is. So with AI, is it a solution looking for a problem, or is it the other way around? So, and what we've found with our customers, it is definitely very different depending on what use case it is. So in stuff like sports branding and analysis and news and archives, it's brilliant. It's really easily adoptable. And I think that's kind of can be pretty mature very early on. Where it's really needed, and certainly from our customers as a real post focus, is an unscripted. When you've got something anywhere from a 300 to 1,000 to 1 shooting ratio, that's a crazy amounts of data. And historically, you've had a human being kind of filtering through that stuff and finding various things. But now we do have the ability to run artificial intelligence and Gen AI on top to add metadata to all these clips. But at what cost? So are people using the hype cycle to invest in technology for the sake of using technology, or have they actually got a use case for it? So interesting, out of a few of the tech sessions that I've done, AI is nowhere near the top of their list in terms of priority, because they've got other things to worry about. And these are big companies. They just think, yeah, it's great, and we will adopt it at some point. We need to find the right use case for it. We need to find a focus for it, and we need to find it at a cost point, at a security level that works for us. So if you're dealing with a big studio, is very different to dealing with someone who's doing some reality TV or a broadcaster, for instance. So are you using AI, for instance, for the sake of using it? I've heard this thrown around quite a few times recently at conferences. Is someone stands up there from a big company, goes, yeah, we used AI to do this. And I generally put my hand up and go, what did you use AI for? Are you just kind of throwing the term around willy-nilly? But that's not really where we want to focus it. We want to find out where AI is useful for a customer, and how they can use it at a useful cost point. So if you take their archive, for instance, I said this is a pretty mature and nice way to do this with the cloud providers at the moment. And I'm not going to get into vendors and vendor specifics, but their acquisition recently, it's for me, it's top of the pile in terms of kind of its AI technology for us. And the acquisition is great because looking at a cloud-based archive, for instance, that's a brilliant way of working. And you can do that analysis on your brands or logos or find people from your archive. That's great, and then pull it back on premise. However, what about your working data? And in post and unscripted, again, with those ridiculous shooting ratios, that working material there's a lot of it. And how do you get access to that metadata? And what's analyzing it to get that metadata? And security seems to be a really strong point for our customers at the moment. So I don't want to send my however many terabytes of data up to the public cloud and being charged per terabyte, for instance, to have it analyzed and then the metadata sent back to me on premise, which may not link up to where that clip is actually on my working storage. So that's one instance. People don't want their footage to leave the building or the data center or their VPC, for instance, if they're running in the cloud. So it kind of really, it's a really interesting position that we're in at the moment because everything is very SaaS based and it is very cloud based at the moment because the processing power is in the cloud. I think we can't get away from that fact. And cloud is fantastic. But what I'm hearing from our customers, they do want an on-premise AI based system for speech to text, for image recognition, for facial recognition, for tagging, things like that. And it has to be on premise, locked behind a door, and they train their own model. That's a really important thing for us. They don't want all of this big public data being thrown into there and going, well, most of that's irrelevant for us. We want real specifics and only lock to those real specifics, but it cannot leave the building. So AI is going to be brilliant going forward. I just think where I've seen it trade shows, and we've looked at many vendors in terms of AI, and a lot of them don't go off script really. So if I'm having a conversation like, can it do that? I want it to do this. I know we're just sticking to this lane. Okay, that's not really what I want to see. I want to see how adaptable and dynamic this can be. Certainly for post, obviously, if we're wanting it to do very specific things, I certainly will be looking at a very specific way of working and a model that I want it to work at. And there is certainly one out there which I think has the best way to train it. It seems to work for us, for our industry in particularly in the best way. But it is, again, sorry to waffle on, but I think going back to the fact that finding a use case for it is important and then finding the right solution for it rather than just using it for the sake of using it.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. In a lot of discussions I've had, some with broadcasters, everyone's interested in it. They're interested maybe looking at POCs on it, on specific use cases at this point. But I've yet to find anyone who says, I want to be on the real leading edge of this. You know, I think the cautious excitement, I think, is the phrase that I've kind of used to describe. And I think that's probably pretty fair for where most people are at the moment.
Yeah, and interestingly, if you look at the AI for public usage, ChatGPT, for instance, free to use, great. This is, there's loads of them out there, but for a specific use case for us, it's not an exactly cheap entry point, is it? Certainly, if there's an on-premise model, GPUs, CPUs, these things aren't easy to get hold of and not cheap. And the license fees are going to be quite expensive. So it isn't something you just kind of dip your toe into. Yeah, you could use the public services to dip your toe into, but again, that's not going to be certainly not going to be the cheapest route to do it. So it really is an interesting talking point, AI. And I think, and if you take the whole fear factor behind it as well, I think we've got to talk about that a little bit. Is it going to take jobs? Is it going to do this and do that? I think the key part to that for me is just workflow efficiency. You can get a lot more done. I think, well, we will get a lot more done when people are using it for the right use case. And I think, unfortunately, businesses and people in various roles are going to have to adapt to it and adopt it and actually say, yep, this is the future of the way things are going to work.
Yeah, I think it also opens up opportunities for people who have a better understanding of what it can do and then be able to utilize it more effectively. But I completely take your point because I think one of the things from Avid's perspective is that we're seeing things very much as a co-pilot because we see ourselves as a creative company and that's what we want to do. But if we can automate some of the mundane stuff, then helping people be more creative, spend more time on the editing process, then I think that's probably going to be a good thing.
Yeah. It's quite an interesting point, actually. So yeah, before IBC, actually, before you guys showed Ada, And I did an article for, I think it was either television or broadcast, and the whole AI hype. And I'm like, what would we like to see out of it? So it was, I said, you know what, an editor being smart enough to know that you've asked it and you've created a bin with A roll, right, based on this, and it's gone off and made the B roll bin before you've even asked it. Those are kind of really cool things that that you could use it for. And another example I was thinking about a couple of weeks ago was actually if you took, if you merge script sync and phrase find, those kind of things together, and actually it goes off and finds those things, cuts the timeline together and finds the B-roll as well. And you end up with a multicam stack, and then just kind of almost then the human gets to manipulate it. So I think going forward, I think it could be incredibly powerful for for workflows like that, for the editing workloads, rather than just the adding of metadata.
You talked about cloud, and cloud is obviously part of AI, but I wanted to ask you more about cloud and hybrid kind of working. Because again, 6, 7 years ago, cloud was going to be the panacea, it's going to solve everything. But more realities come in. Cost is one factor of that. So when you look at things at the moment, Chris, is it hybrid working that seems to be the way that most people are kind of going to go, use the cloud where it's appropriate, but keep a lot of things potentially still on-prem?
Absolutely. I think in VFX, I think cloud is really mature in VFX and burst compute. So I don't think that's really going to go away. And obviously, having archive in the cloud, that's perfect. That's cost effective. We have with some providers there is zero egress for those things. Egress is a real big blocker, I find, and certainly in post production. I'm going to focus mainly on post production because that's really where our bread and butter is. But for post, to run a post facility in a cloud, a public cloud, should I say, is just far too expensive. And we've even over the past year or so, or 2 years, have repatriated a lot of customers from public cloud back into on-premise tin, which is not ideal. But actually, what we've been doing is taking them to like hyper-converged, like Nutanix, for instance, putting it in a data center. Okay, yes, you're paying the power costs, and like an HCI stack might be expensive, but actually in the long run, you're able to use that as much or as little as you like. So what we're finding is that's really what customers are doing. Obviously, if you take the big studios and broadcasters, for instance, who have these massive deals with these hyperscalers and public cloud hyperscalers, that's their roadmap for their business as well. So and you got to take in sustainability into this as well. One of Jigsaw's big things is sustainability as well. Is the cloud sustainable versus all these CPUs and GPUs running in these data centers around the world? Is that actually more sustainable than running X on premise or in your own data center? So I think those are important things to look at as well. But again, it depends who the customer is and what the workflow is. With the movie Labs 2030 vision, everything hits the cloud first. And we have customers who utilize that. Things go into archive first. That's great. But actually, hosting your compute up there is expensive, but it's the egress cost, which I think is the real blocker for that.
Yeah, without a doubt, it's an interesting point. It's not just getting it in; it is getting it back out again that kind of counts. So, Chris, really interested to talk to you. I mean, lots and lots of different things. Hopefully, people listening can take out of that. As you know, there is one question I ask everyone on the podcast, so I'm going to ask you, which is, what is it, if anything, that keeps you up at night?
Well, from my job role, certainly it's missing out. Fear of missing out on the next big thing. I get really excited about technology and workflows, certainly in this industry. And I'd like to see the new best thing first and be able to go to my bosses and go to our customers and go, do you know what we've seen? You need to see this. I get very excited when certain vendors or someone shows us something that's really exciting, groundbreaking, and new. I like to have it in our demo estate as quickly as possible. So it would absolutely be finding the next big thing and like bringing the best to our customer. Really, I think that's kind of the bit that really kind of keeps me up at night.
I think for all of us in the media tech business, trying to stay across all of the latest innovations is a constant quest. So Chris is not alone in that. Thanks a lot to him for joining us, and if you check out the show notes, you can find a link to the Jigsaw24 website, plus lots of information about the various innovations which Avid showcased at NAB in Vegas, so please check that out. Don't forget to rate, share and leave a review on the podcast, and for all the latest Avid news, stay up to date across our various social channels. That's all for this episode. Thanks to Chris again, thanks to Matt Diggs, our producer, and thanks to you for taking the time out of your day to listen in. Join me, Craig Wilson, next time for more of the people making the media.